Have you ever had this situation? It's 9:03 in the morning. You just get to your desk and an email comes in and it's labeled urgent. There you is. Your boss is telling you that the work you handed in last night that you spent all day on that you were so proud of. And he says, this missed the mark. You feel your chest get tight. You feel the blood rushing to your face. All sorts of emotions are going through you right now. How do you regulate that? Well, that is the theme of today's podcast. I am Chris Hadnagy, CEO and founder of Social Engineer LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation, and the Institute for Social Engineering. And this is episode 303 of the Doctor is In series. And as always, our resident co-host is none other than Dr. Abbie. Dr. Abbie, nice to have you here with us.
Nice to be here, Chris. I'm Dr. Abbie. I'm a behavioral scientist and the Director of Education at Social Engineer. I specialize in human decision-making, influence, and nonverbal communication.
And if you can't get enough of Dr. Abbie and I, because like this podcast, 25 minutes, and you're like, I need more of Chris and Dr. Abbie. I think someone's feeling that out there. You got to come to the Human Behavior Conference. We have a 2-day amazing packed panel of just unbelievable people. And if you don't believe me, just go humanbehaviorcon.com and check it out. Some of the world's renowned people in their fields, some of the best speakers, teachers, and trainers. And they're going to all be here in Orlando, November 14th and 15th. You can't get even one of those people in a room for the price of a ticket, let alone get all of the people that are in that room for the price of the ticket. So go check it out. Join Dr. and Abbie and I, as well as a host of a bunch of other people that are just amazing. Now, quickly, as we go on till we get to the episode, as you know, if you want to be interested in social engineering and join our Slack channel, the link is below. And if you are interested in helping support Innocent Lives Foundation, or if you need information on our mission that is helping stop child predators with law enforcement, go to innocentlivesfoundation.org and you can donate, or you can also find out more about our mission. And if you like the music on the intro of this podcast, it is none other than Clutch. So go check out clutchmerch.com. You think I would know that site by the heart, right? Okay. And last but not least, if you like the episode, give us a heart, a thumbs up. And really, honestly, I keep saying this, but it's true. Your comments and your suggestions for topics, they really do affect Abbie and I. And we, a lot of times the topics that we choose are done because of what you said or what you suggested. So Abbie, I know I gave a little story, but why don't you tell everyone what really are we going to be talking about today?
Yes. Well, the workplace is an emotional place. And how employees regulate their emotions and employers regulate their emotions significantly affect well-being and burnout and workplace relationships. So we're going to be talking about emotions in the workplace.
Probably a very fitting topic. I think,
yes.
Of course, I think, we've always been a remote company, but COVID, people went separate. And then all of a sudden now it's like, oh, come back to the office. And it was like 3 years of not interacting with humans. Yeah. So there's probably some good strategies we're going to hear today about how to do this. Yeah.
And employees spend about a third of our waking hours at work. So we say, there's work-life balance, but it really is impossible to separate personal emotions from a professional life, given most of our waking hours are spent at work for the average person. And conventional wisdom suggests, leave that at the office door. But research shows that it's central to productivity to be utilizing our emotions for collaboration. And we cannot leave our emotions at the door. As much as that would be great to be like, okay, I'm going to completely separate. It's just not a skill that most of us have, nor should we. And we can do it to a degree. But the idea that we can completely leave emotions behind and just get into work focus and, if we're not good with regulating our emotions, it won't affect our work at all. It's rubbish.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go through some of these strategies. Like the first strategy being deep acting. Explain what is that and why does it work?
Okay, deep acting is basically just reappraisal for another term. So it involves changing how you think about a situation to alter the emotional response. So instead of forcing a smile, someone who genuinely shifts their internal feelings to reinterpret the situation may actually, instead of, okay, I'm going to force the emotion, they think, how do I reinterpret to create the emotion? So, for example, a customer service worker may reframe an aggressive customer as someone struggling with their own stress. So instead of taking someone else's emotions and behavior personally, you reframe it so that you understand their perspective. So there's a couple of different ways that reappraisal applies, but I would say this is probably one of the most important ones because we get triggered very easily. And if you're in a very stressful job and say you get an email that seems a little bit blunt, you might think, wow, how rude. And you might get triggered. You might act emotionally. But if you just think, I bet they've got a very busy schedule, they probably emailed me very quickly, so weren't thinking about the emotional tone. So the key mechanism here is that cognitive reappraisal. It's shifting the meaning of an event to change the emotional impact. And this is something that I think Chris and I have a pretty good understanding of from recent events. Chris, do you want to tell the story?
Oh, I know you're going to bring up the story, huh?
Yes, I mean, it fits. It fits.
It does fit. Okay, so you want all the details or?
Yeah, go on then.
Okay, so right now we're working on completing Abbie's visa. I'm sorry, her green card, not a visa. Yeah. Green card, because she's been here on the visa for long enough, and green card is now the next step. And there's a lot of stress with it. I mean, the paperwork, I think the application's over 1,000 pages. There's so many things that have to be done. It's not a cheap process. And what it does is it gives Abbie the freedom to be a citizen in the country, but also to go and work anywhere that she wants. And we had a contract previous to this that was like, hey, you have to be employed here because this visa says so. And I can't get rid of you and you can't go work somewhere else. And that, unbeknownst to me, gave Abbie a lot of security, made her feel secure. And then when that was going away, I started playing this theme in my head that, well, she's going to quit. As soon as she gets her green card, she's going to leave. And you started wondering if I was going to fire you as soon as you got your green card because I was getting a little upset and we weren't communicating. And then we have this meeting where we're talking about something and you bring up how much, you love it here and you never want to leave this company. And I'm like, what? I thought you're getting ready to quit. You're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, that's what I thought you were saying when you're going to get your green card. You have freedom to go anywhere. And I thought you meant you were leaving. And you're like, what are you talking about? We had this like duh moment of what the heck is going on. And I think that, that kind of prompted that article I wrote, but it was an interesting lesson for all of us, to sit back and be like, I should have just maybe came at that with a different approach.
Yep. And that's where the reappraisal really comes in, because from my perspective, you see a change in behavior. And my perspective is, okay, I see this change. I see a little bit more resistance. I'm now coming out of security. So this change to me, I'm reading it as, okay, there is trouble. There is trouble. So how do I react? I don't address the situation. I don't reappraise the situation. I get stuck in my emotions. So I now become irritable and I now become very short-tempered. And then Chris reads my irritability and short-tempered as, okay, she's unhappy here. She wants to leave. And really, if we had both just reappraised the situation of what's the other person's perspective on this, we could then have thought, okay, well, maybe they're feeling like this. Let's have an open conversation. But we often just get so involved in our emotions. We don't take a step back to think, maybe I'm reading that response differently.
And that's an interesting lesson because, I mean, both of us have been under tremendous stress for different reasons and also similar reasons over the last couple months. So a reappraisal should have been easy to say like, well, you and I, we talk a lot and we work a lot, really long hours. So I know all the stress things you're going through. You know all the stress things I'm going through. So it'd have been easier, you think, to sit back and go, well, I know she's under an extreme amount of stress with everything going on with your apartment and your life and all this and blah, blah, blah. And you know, everything's going on here. So it's like, we could have been, this is just a stress response, not an unhappy desire to run away response. Hindsight. It's always easier, isn't it?
And deep acting can actually be quite difficult to engage in if you're unfamiliar. So it can help to practice cognitive reframing. So when you are in a frustrating situation, actively asking yourself, is there another way to look at this? So when you catch yourself being reactive, stopping and not just stopping and, trying to regulate your emotions, actively ask yourself that question. Okay, well, this is how I'm reading it. Let me purposely read it in other ways. Because by doing so, you're really teaching yourself, well, I'm laser focused, but there's so many different things, because it's like when I teach nonverbals and I say, you see a sign of discomfort. Maybe they have a tummy ache.
Yeah.
Maybe they have something that has absolutely no relevance to what you're saying, that you would have, you would never know. Maybe they had something that doesn't agree with them. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they just got in an argument. You really don't know. And it's the same when we react to someone's behavior. Maybe they're going through something that we have absolutely no idea about. And maybe it's about us and maybe it's not. But unless we pause and ask ourselves, am I being too reactive? Is there another way to look at this? Often we're just going to stay in that emotion. And that's why we send those angry emails and those angry texts that we really shouldn't do.
That's a really good point, because I think it's easy to make a story in your head and then convince yourself, we look for the evidence that I'm right. And I know I'm right, because look at the way she just said that. And I knew it. I knew I was right. And we never look for the other, the opposite bias. And I think it's an interesting thing to start practicing more. I like what you said, stopping for a minute and saying, okay, what other reasons could this have happened?
Yeah.
What other reasons that somebody said this or did this way? That feels like a very empathetic approach to communicating, right? Because now, instead of just saying, I'm right, okay, let me think of 4 other angles I can come at this. And now you might start having some empathy for the person.
Yep. And it's interesting you say that too, because one of the proven ways to increase deep acting is empathy exercises. So actively putting yourself in their shoes before reacting emotionally. When you feel yourself reacting, think, let me consider their situation. And that's what Chris and I did after we had that conversation. And I can't remember what it was that sparked it, but I think I just said, I don't feel I have any security right now. And a contract is something that, even if it's just metaphorically secure, because I can technically get out of it, it's security. And then Chris paused and I said, don't let me go. And he said, don't go. And it's that moment where you consider that perspective. And he paused and thought, what about her situation? And then I paused and thought, well, what about his situation? And from that moment, all the irritability and negative emotions that had come up to protect ourselves deflated, because now empathy is involved.
Right. And the stress just was gone.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was bam, 1 second there, 1 second gone. Okay, that's interesting.
And that's often how it is. We have huge blowouts at work, or even in our relationships, personal relationships, because we don't just stop to think about their perspective. And most of the time you hear these disagreements, and when you ask, well, what was the problem? People say they weren't considering my perspective. They weren't thinking about what I need. And it's a really useful skill to have, especially if you're dealing with clients too, because that skill is transferable. Thinking about, okay, say I'm in marketing or sales, thinking about, well, what does the client need? So how can I sell it to them? It's the same with emotions of, what does that other person feel? So how can I now address this appropriately? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good skill in anything, not just the workplace. Right. It's we could probably tell a ton of stories about how we could have saved ourselves some stupid situations by just utilizing this one skill. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go down the list a little bit, because we spend a lot of time on that one, but it's important. But I think this one ties in. We talk about mindfulness and acceptance. Yeah. How does that strategy work, and why is that one, how are we going to be able to build that in the workplace?
Well, understanding mindfulness is pretty much the opposite of surface acting. So typically what we do when we feel emotions, especially in the workplace, we think that this is not an appropriate time to be emotional. I need to have left my emotions at the door. So when an emotion comes up, everything's fine. Yeah. We modify the outward expression only. We don't actually change the internal emotion. We go, oh, no problem. And what we're thinking is, this is a problem. I'm really mad. But we don't actually try and address that emotion. We just address the surface. That's why it's called surface acting.
Mm-hmm.
And employees will suppress frustration all the time and fake a different emotion to comply with expectations in the workplace. For example, maybe you're a flight attendant or you're dealing with a customer and they're being very rude. And you just force a smile. So it's emotional suppression. And this is really harmful because it leads to extreme emotional fatigue. And what happens when you're emotionally fatigued? You do one thing that might push you over the edge. And then that's where blowouts happen. And having an active understanding of mindfulness and acceptance is really important, because if instead of suppressing or over-identifying with emotions, mindfulness acknowledges the emotion without judgment and you let it pass naturally. So when we say, I shouldn't feel this, or I need to make this go away, it doesn't go away. So instead of that frustration comes up and you put on a smile, say everything's fine, maybe you're a manager and you notice that frustration rising, say you're in a meeting, and instead of just pushing it down and suppressing it, you choose to pause and breathe. That's mindfulness. It doesn't mean you have to sit and go, everybody stop, I'm going to meditate. It can be pausing and breathing rather than reacting immediately. So that key mechanism is non-reactivity, allowing emotions to be present, because sometimes it also takes a minute to realize what we're feeling. So a negative emotion might come up and you think it's anger, and actually it's frustration. Or actually you're just a little bit upset because you feel like you weren't validated. And they're very different emotions, but it can take a second to figure out what it is that you're feeling. And this isn't just something you want to do in the moment. Mindfulness is a skill that you practice regularly. And if you are regularly, why am I struggling with that word? Regularly. There's a lot of... It's a tongue twister if you say it too many times.
Yeah.
But if you often practice
this
mindfulness, then in general, you have reduced stress. And in general, you have increased emotional awareness and resilience. So you're going to be less reactive in general anyway. So you can more likely prevent burnout. And it's just a very useful skill to have, and it will translate to any workplace situation.
Yeah, I imagine it'd be like muscle memory. Like the more you do it, then the next time you feel that, instead of having to stop, pause, and think, you'll just automatically let the emotion go through.
Yes. And if you are new to mindfulness, there are some really great techniques to help build it. So one is a stop method. Really simple. Stop, take a breath, observe emotions, proceed with intention. So the stop, take a breath, observe, proceed with intention. And if you just remember that stop, when that emotion comes up, think, no. Now observe. That's where it comes in. Am I angry, or am I just a little bit upset that someone didn't listen to my point? Because that's a different way to address that. And once you understand what you're feeling, that proceeding with intention, okay, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? Now let's get to the root of the issue. Sorry, I feel like my point wasn't considered, rather than just, okay, they're inconsiderate.
I had a guy on the podcast a couple episodes ago, and he said a statement that I found fascinating. He said, learn to respond, not to react. And I'm like, ooh, that's nice. Right? Because he says most of the time we react. Something happens and we react, and that's it. And then we go with the reaction. But if we do what you just said, that pause, this is also great advice for security. Like, this is what we tell people. Like, if you're on a phone call and you're feeling emotional, pause. Why am I feeling emotional? And that might be an indicator that you're getting hacked. So this is like great advice for all around, for all sorts of situations. Okay. So what else can we do? What other things can we use to regulate the strategies?
So I'm going to give one that is a double-edged sword, and it's social sharing, because this can be really good and really bad. And some people go, okay, so gossip in the workplace, perfect. Not quite what it means. So I don't go and now I'm like going, Chris annoyed me. Let me go to one of the other employees and complain about Chris to them. And then that's me dealing with my emotions. is not the best strategy. But talking about emotions with a trusted colleague to vent frustrations can be important because you can gain perspective. Mm-hmm. But it's all about the way that you do it. So, okay, I'm feeling this emotion and this is a situation that occurred. Can you help me see perspective? Because that cognitive reframing can be really difficult. Even when you say, let me consider their perspective, when it's our emotions, we are biased. And even when you're trying to step out of that situation, it can be difficult. So having someone else gain perspective can be useful for you. But the way that you do it is important. So you don't want to go and start gossiping in the workplace because that is very negative.
I think something else you said, which is important, is choosing the right person, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying she's the wrong person, but I went to Arisa with my concerns, and then you and her also talk a lot. And then you said a couple things to her where she came to me and she's like, yes, she's leaving. She's done. She's checked out. She doesn't even want to be here anymore. So now we were feeding each other the wrong thing, right? There was no regulation. Now we're sitting at the dinner table at night and she's like, yeah, I think Abbie's gone. Like, I don't know, like what's going to happen. As soon as she gets that green card, she's out of here. Right. And I'm like, yeah, I know it.
Yeah.
Right? So getting the right person, I think is really important.
The funny thing is, when you go to someone for a new perspective, you want someone that has a different perspective.
Yeah.
You went to someone in the same position as you.
Yeah.
And that's often what we do.
Yeah.
Because we go to our person, and often our person is someone, say I go to a colleague that is in the same role as me. They're likely to have the same perspective as me. The best thing to do is to go to someone who is going to be able to offer a slightly different perspective, because their emotions about the situation are less likely to come into play. So if I say you got this email, how would you feel? And it's someone in the same situation as me, their response is likely to be the same. Maybe I take it to someone in a different department or at a different level that might see it slightly differently and not take it so personally. Their response is going to be a bit more useful to me than it is someone who's just going to have the same emotional response, because what happens? You end up spiraling in it.
Yeah. I mean, I eventually went to my therapist about it, right? And and she had something really great. She's like, do you care for Abbie? I said, yes, I do. I consider her a friend, like family. And she's like, so if she leaves, why would she leave? Is it because she's unhappy? I'm like, no, probably for more money and less stress. And she goes, so wouldn't that make Abbie happier? And I'm like, yeah, it would. And she goes, so then wouldn't you be happy for her? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I would. And she's like, so then stop being upset. You can't control if she leaves. I'm like, ah. So she didn't correct my emotion, but she came a different perspective. Like, so if you did, like, why, why is that so awful? Like, well, we don't really want to lose her because we love having her here and she brings a lot to the company. Yeah. And she's like, yeah, okay, but that's not under your control.
But then let's take that cognitive reappraisal again and let's apply the empathy tactic of, okay, well, instead of why would she leave, of, okay, what's important to this person? What are their value system? Because if you change that, what's important to me, the stress, I can manage stress. My whole life is work, right? So the stress is never really a factor to me. If you say you could do this, but it's going to be highly stressful, all I hear is, you can do this. So that doesn't come into play when it comes to me. And the money factor is also, it's never been my key driver.
Yeah.
My key driver is passion and education and their love for what I do. And then money is always a secondary thing for me. Whereas for other people in different jobs, it may be the complete opposite. And there's no right or wrong way.
Yeah.
It's just, what does this person value? And what is this person's thinking? Because we appraise situations according to our own values often, or our own thinking. So when we're trapped in a situation, we're thinking, well, how would I respond? Because of what right now is important to me. Stepping into not just this person's situation, but who this person is, which is, again, a very difficult thing to do when you're high in emotions, because we know that our emotional responses take over our prefrontal cortex, which is where critical thinking happens, which is the skill that we need to do this. So having mindfulness and being able to pull those emotions back, breathe and think, okay, let me step away and let me think about this person and their situation. And then things become a little bit clearer.
Yeah, 100% true. Really. I liked the explanation of that because I think workplace gossip can actually make things worse.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, so it wasn't gossip, but kind of like what happened here. By me going to Arisa, now I had someone else confirming my wrong opinion, right? And it hurt. It hurt more, It was not good.
It's like if you have an idea, and we see this with conspiracy theories, you bring it to other people with similar ideas, they can get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you confirm with each other and then you rile each other up. It's like, have you ever gone to a friend about a situation that you're angry about? And then you tell them and they get really angry.
Yeah.
And then you're like, yeah, I am mad about this.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, you should be mad. And then I am mad. And then you both just get angrier.
Yeah. Yeah. Next thing you know is you're kicking a door down, burning down a house.
Yep. And this in the workplace, we laugh about it, but it can escalate very quickly.
Yeah.
And say you're an employer and you don't recognize this, an angry employee can do a lot of damage to a business. If you have an employee that is not in their right mind and they are just angry and you don't stop to address that situation, they can do a lot of reputation damage to your business and to you.
Yeah. And let's talk about insider threat, right? So this is where it comes from. You have an angry employee that doesn't get the chance to work that out. That's where we see this, our company, we see credentials being sold on the dark web. We see information being dispersed or, like you said, reputational damage that can be destructive. Yeah. So 100%. Okay. We're coming up on 30 minutes. So how many more do we got?
So we have a few, and it would take episodes and episodes to address the situation. So some of the best ways, I mean, I'm British, so I love this one. But sometimes humor and distraction, right? So if you are in a highly emotional situation, sometimes the best thing to do is just not address it. So if you're just butting heads and nothing is happening, and if you keep at this issue, it's going to cause a bigger issue and it's going to be a blowout. If you really cannot address it, sometimes the best thing to do is stop addressing it. Maybe pause and step away, or sometimes humor. Sometimes humor can serve as a really great coping mechanism, and this depends on the relationship.
Yeah, I got a question about that one. Like, you have to be really cautious with that, I would imagine.
Well, it would depend, because sometimes humor can lighten the situation. And distraction can sometimes shift attention away from overwhelming emotions. Now, this doesn't address the issue and make the issue go away, but what it does do is allow the people time for their emotions to go down. Because if you're at that point, sometimes, because emotions can take over critical thinking, neither of you are in a state where you're going to say, okay, let's have a proper conversation about this. And what you need is something to pull you out of it so that you can. And whether that is a joke, or maybe you're facing a stressful deadline and you joke about the situation to relieve tension. Or maybe you say, I just need to take a quick walk, or I need to get up, have a coffee. And that is distraction, something that removes you from that interaction. And it's really important sometimes that we realize if you can't address it right now, it is okay to say, I'm struggling to deal with my emotions right now. And that's something we feel shame about. Say your boss is having a conversation with you. We often don't feel like we can say, I actually can't have this conversation right now. I'm really in my emotions. And whether it's boss to employee or employee to boss, sometimes saying, I can't have this. Let me just grab a drink. Let me grab a snack. I'm someone who is hungry. So if I haven't eaten every few hours, I do get irritable. So I have no shame in saying, I'm actually really hungry. Can I please just grab something to eat? And then can we communicate? And I've said that before, and I've come back, and it's like I'm a new person again. So whatever it is that you need to do just to remove yourself and come back, it is okay to do that. And the reason I say humor is I'm British. So it is very common that if there's a lot of stress, someone will make a joke about the situation. And when we laugh, it releases endorphins, and that reduces stress. So for some people, it can be a coping mechanism. And I know here in our workplace, if we make a joke about something, if everyone's stressed, you can kind of see the tension go away immediately. Yeah. So it depends if you have a very family-like workplace like ours, it works great. If you don't, then it might not be the best approach and distraction might be better.
Yeah, I think you really do have to just think through your humor. Like it would have been a really bad time for me to go, hey, Abbie, you're fired. Right? That would have been not a great humorous joke. Yeah. Right? And then like, I'm just kidding. April Fools. Right? That would have been like, that would have added stress. But I also like what you said about the taking a break, because I think sometimes where people fail with this is they go, listen, I'm too emotional. I can't deal with this right now. Done. That doesn't give me any hope. But you say, I can't deal with this right now. I'm too emotional. I need 10 minutes. Can we re-meet in 10 minutes? I'm just going to go get some food and then I'm going to come back. That at least says I'm not pushing you off. I'm not saying, hey, Abbie, I don't have time for you right now because I'm too emotional. I'm saying, let's talk about this at this time. So I like that method.
Yeah. Cause the goal isn't to make the conversation go away. The goal is to address the emotional aspect. When you get to that emotional overwhelm, it's pull yourself out of it so you can come back. Not to make the whole conversation go away completely. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Well, like you said, we probably could spend hours on these topics and trying to help. But I think that these, we're going to put these in the show notes and people can read some more on this with all the research that you always provide. But these are some really good tips on emotional regulation. And I know we put in the workplace, but honestly, I feel like these can be used family, friends, anywhere. Right? I mean, these can just be used in life, just daily life. We should rechange it to emotional regulation in life. So good research. I mean, you have like a ton here too.
Yeah. And just a final point, emotional regulation is a skill. So don't be hard on yourself if you go away from this and try it instantly and you're still not great at it. It's a skill. It takes time to learn. Emotions are very difficult. By nature, they are overwhelming. But with the right strategies, we can protect and strengthen those workplace relationships and not be so reactive. But we do need to do it with intention.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, this is good. Well, thanks again, Dr. Abbie. You always come up with some good themes. Was this one of ours, or was this a fan suggestion?
This was someone messaged in asking how to not want to throttle their boss. So I thought of a better way to phrase the question.
Yes. So maybe we could title it How to Not Throttle Your Boss, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Emotional regulation in the workplace. I love it.
How not to commit murder at work.
Yeah, yes. How to not murder at work. That's wonderful. I don't think we're going to name it that. So what's our theme for next month that we're going to be talking about? I think what I remember is the lonely chapter.
Oh, yes. We had a few.
Yeah.
We've actually had a lot of people write in for topics. So we had a little bit of a debate of one, or I had an internal debate. But one I'm going to go to is we're going to talk about the lonely chapter, which is the transition period of changing who you were to who you want to be, but you're not quite there. And it's that period in between.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to it. Sure you all are. Thanks for joining us this month on the Doctor is In series. Just go and regulate yourself and have a good day. See ya.